All right, we're here, everybody. What is a live stream without challenges, right? That's why I'm trying to sit as close today, because as we were about to go live for this silliness, I moved our Tascam from the jam room into the other room where this is all going down. And lo and behold, Tascam is having some issues. The plug is not getting power. Who the fudge knows what's really going on there? So that's why I'm a little bit more up in your face, because I'm just using the internal microphone here on the computer. So yeah, this is old school status, everybody. And yeah, I appreciate that, Malito. What is going on? Jacob, what is going on, guys, across the pond? Life is cray-cray, is it not? Yes, indeed it is. I'm going to get this telephone thing out so that I can set that down now. But let's tweet out this linky dink and give everybody a few minutes to kind of filter in. I know it's very late over on the other side of the planet, but I am so stoked that any of you amigos of mine that are jumping on to say what's up, it is supremely appreciated. But I am just going to lower my volume, tweet out this link, and we will be good to go here in just a few minutes. And hoping that you'll actually get the chance to check this book out. I'm kind of going to be under the impression that a lot of people are not the biggest fans of this selection, but I think it's very important for any constant readers, any fans of Psy King, and I hope you can hear me at least okay enough, despite the fact that I'm not using a $200 and something microphone, and I'm using the internal components here. So hopefully, yes. Okay, I see some peeps filtering in. That's good. That's good. Okay, get this link. And I actually, since I'm sitting this close to the computer, I don't even really need. Sound is good. Okay, awesome. Mikey, what is up, guys? Got Corey Novak. Teddy, what is going on, man? Good to see you, man. Okay, who else? We got some peeps pouring in. All right, let me just get this link out and we will start the proceedings properly. I hope everyone is staying safe. That seems to be the term that is so popular right now. Stay safe, guys, you know, as opposed to stay scared, like we say here on the horror show, stay safe. It's a little overdone for me at this point, but I know it's all well-meaning, and you know, it's out of care and compassion and all of those things. Just insult to injury of the Tascam seemingly not working. I don't know if the plug got damaged when I was moving stuff into the other room for this or what, but yeah, good times. So I'm just going to just do the whole live now. So say hello and stay healthy, and good tidings to everyone else in the chat right now. Live order, bam. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lots of exclamation points, always helpful for attention getting, right? Okay. Okay. Wonder what everybody has been binge watching. I hope it's not the trash TV that is Tiger King. My God. It's, at least for me, it's not a train wreck that I can't keep my eyes off of. It's the equivalent of like reading the goddamn National Enquirer or something. So I am not captivated like a lot of other peeps by that. But, you know, since I'm close enough, I don't even really need the, well, actually, no, maybe I will just set this down and continue having the phone at least as the option. But, okay, everybody, well, let's start it out proper. Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime in Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of bracing your eardrums for Hail to Stephen King. That's right, all those dope books behind me. Love Psy King, El Rey, my dude, and I am just as immensely appreciative as always for anybody that is taking their time out of you know, streaming whatever stuff you've been doing. I actually heard recently that over in the UK, they had to take Netflix from high definition down to standard definition because everybody is at home just watching stuff, taking up all the bandwidth, and it's kind of messing stuff up. I have noticed some slowness to my internet connection, so fingers firmly crossed, knock on wood here, that things stream at least smoothly despite not using my regular microphone because of issues with that. But we're here, everybody. My You Ka-Tet of awesome people that I cannot extend enough thanks for just all of our blessedly badass interactions. We are talking about, for its 20th anniversary, Psy King's kind of writing guide, kind of autobiography. It's kind of divided into multiple halves and stuff like that. So sorry it wasn't scary stuff this month. I think maybe this was a opportune choice for the month of March for the book of the month. But we are discussing On Writing, a memoir of the craft. So this is essentially, as I said, it's King talking about just the inspiration to write and a little bit of his childhood and, you know, into his formative years in high school and in college and, you know, meeting Tabby and getting book deals and stuff like that. So I do have lots of notes. I have 2 different copies of this because this was the original hardcover, and I know there's some different versions of it, like in the paperback form. This was a paperback 10th anniversary edition right there. So yeah, this one, all that it really adds is just an additional like 80 titles to his reading list because in the back, like appendix, like postscript sort of stuff, King initially gave like a big, you know, just assortment of recommendations of books by various authors that have entertained and inspired him to some degree. So all that this really did for the 10-year anniversary was double dip and add an updated additional reading list. But essentially, there's really no difference aside from that and the edition that I just showed you. So this was the one that I was actually reading along with listening because this is one of the few editions for the Audible audiobook, wherever, you know, you listen to your stuff. There's so many competing services now. There's audiobooks.com. There's obviously Amazon's Audible. There's Scribd still has like all the Psy King stuff, at least, even though they took all of their Star Wars books out of the streaming, which kind of ticked me off because they were essentially the Netflix of streaming, and they took all of the Star Wars stuff off. And yet I own most of the Stephen King audiobooks, so I don't know, I'll probably cancel them at some point. But there's lots of other good stuff to read on Scribd, SCRIBD.com, streaming audiobooks, and you can stream as much as you want, which is kind of dope. But yeah, King reads this one himself, guys, and it's just much more interesting hearing him give his critiques of other writers, hear him talk about his own childhood when you hear, you know, El Rey himself actually, you know, having that palaver with you. It's very intimate and it's very just cool in that regard. So, you know, shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, El Rey, the King, for actually deciding to do that. And this was a book that was written around a very trying time in King's life. And so he started it in 1997, and yet he knew that he had all these other projects he was trying to finish. He had just started working on From a Buick 8. He was trying to finish compiling Everything's Eventual. I know he had started more Dark Tower stuff, all these different things. But yeah, lo and behold, we all know what happened, you know, to King in the years shortly thereafter with getting run down in 99, various injuries of a nasty, sad, despicable regard. And so he actually talks about that at the end of the book, which is interesting. So that's why it took until 2000 for this book to actually come out, despite the fact that he started it in 97. He also mentions in this book that he put it away because of the fact that he worked on a bunch of it. He liked to a degree what he was doing, but he got stuck on it. He got writer's block and he got very frustrated. And like very much with The Stand, which he talks about here, it's one of the only books that he just locked in a drawer and was ready to give up on. So because it was unfinished. You know, it's different with Pet Sematary because that was finished and he thought it was too effed up, so he hid it away. But The Stand, he got writer's block and he couldn't figure out how to finish it. He was like, I'm 500 pages into this book, you know, the sky is falling. What the hell am I going to do? Same thing happened with this. And he was honestly ready to tell his publisher that, you know, I thought it was a good idea at the time, but maybe it's not. So I'm glad that he came back after a number of years, was able to finish it. And so, of course, I have notes. But before that, let's check in on the chat room. Now, Cecil has long told me that I need to sit closer to the camera. I don't know, I'm a little camera shy kind of guy, so I wonder how good of an idea that is. Plus, I like to have all of my cool books in the shot and stuff, but I was in the middle of redesigning a set. I had a chair that I was looking at, all this other stuff. And then, of course, you know, losing the day job and all of these other things. It's been hard out there for a pimp, man. You know what I'm saying? So we are just kind of riding the wave as we continue along with the craziness that is existence right now, but trying my best to to the glass half full mentality. And honestly, entertainment and even just having this palaver with Sai King was a very pleasant diversion and one that I greatly appreciated. So we're going to check in with the live chat. We have 19 people in the chat right now. That's rather convenient, and I appreciate the hell out of that. My dude Malito, he's already in there. Mentioned Jacob Dowse, my dude in the UK. What is going on? Mikey Mnemonic, aka the artist formerly known as Mikey Trauma Trash. Sup mofos, says he. Corey Novak, what's happening? It's sad that we didn't get to see him this year because of not being able to travel for hopes for a film that we were making, and the film has been delayed because the world is on hold. Everybody, we know this to be the case. So yeah. Thanks for tuning in. This was a very influential book for me in college, said Teddy Holiday. Yeah, this is one that even just reapproaching it in these last few days and stuff, man, I mean, it was definitely one of those that I was like, I have to get back to some ideas because I'm getting stir crazy and I need to start trying to write again, start trying to develop some story ideas that I've had forever that I've pulled a Sai King with, that I've worked on and then got frustrated and not known how to finish them and just shelved them. This was a book that inspired me to hop back on that proverbial horse. So I hope that, it has done the same for other people. Landro, says Papa Fuego. Well, I don't know about that, but I'll take it. Yo, what's up? I read this when I was 19 and a freshman in college, and it really inspired me. Teddy goes on to say, as corny as it sounds. No, dude, that's not corny in any regard whatsoever. I mean, this, I don't know. As King even says at one point where he's talking about like book workshops and retreats and stuff like that, that he thinks there's kind of a corniness to those. They're not necessarily as proper as he would like them to be, but they still can serve a purpose. Richard Forrest is here. Hey, discovered your channel this week. Been watching a lot of your Hail to Stephen King videos. That is badass, man. I'm so supremely thankful for that, Richard. That's what's up. Tasha Helms says, hi. I'm staying tired as fuck. My hours have increased. Mike, damn, Mikey. Well, gangster, at least, stack the cash while these things are going on. Loving the beard, by the way. I almost shaved this beard off recently because I've been like, I'm going Rip Van Winkle status and, all of this. But, it'll stick around at least for now. All right. Chief says, long days and pleasant nights, Fuego. May yours be twice as long, said Chief. Jake Hamburg says, what's up, Fuego? You're the man. Well, I'm a man of many and one of many passionate, constant readers. Corey says, Fuego, my man. I got my daughter, Riley, sitting in my lap watching this with me. Give a shout out, please. Riley, what is up? I hope you are having some awesome daughter-daddy time. It's insanely important, especially now with the way the world is. Larry Scruggs says, I've been revisiting the X-Files. Well, Stephen King wrote an episode of the X-Files. Not a very good one, but nonetheless, that's a terrific show to be revisiting at this time in the weirdness of existence. I actually really enjoyed this book. Truth be told, lots of great insight into King's creative process and so many great anecdotes. Yeah, Jacob, that was one of my favorite things, like rereading it. And I have like a bunch of passages marked that I am specifically going to just go to because he has these awesome analogies and like almost like allegorical insights where he gets his point across very, very well. And that's some of the stuff that I'm looking forward the most to, actually being able to reference here. Mikey says it got taken down from 4K to 1080, so it's all good. Okay, so maybe if you have the 4K streaming, they bump you down to 1080. If you have the 1080, they bump you down to what? I guess 560, 520. I don't know. I know it's 720, maybe it's 480. I can't remember those aspect ratios, damn it. Yes, my internet is slow as fuck. Yeah, that's what I've been enduring. Brandon McNamara says, hey, Fuego, it's my first time catching a live chat. Love your thread on King and the horror show in general is kick-ass. Yes, thank you so very much, everybody who has been supporting the horror show with viewership. We haven't been getting together as much. We've been trying the social distancing thing and just trying to get together. I think we've got together once since Arizona basically went on this full stay-at-home lockdown quarantine sort of thing. The numbers keep rising and the world is scary, but nonetheless, you have to try your damnedest to stay as positive as possible, and a nice escape with reading or, viewing stuff is always helpful. White Tim says, hey, Fuego. Austin Bonnell says, I've been waiting 2 weeks for this. Damn right. Well, I'm so very glad that you can be here, Austin. Who else we got? Red Vitamin Blue. Infinite Jest is in King's recommended reading list, and when I got to it, my brain broke after 50 pages. White Tim says, On Writing is such a great book. Wish he'd do a full autobiography. Yeah, especially with how awesome those insights are. that he gives in the first like about 100 pages or so. It's called CV, but we were about to get to that. Okay, Sky says, love the biblical look. Yeah, that's kind of what I've been going for. I don't want to get all sacrilegious or anything, but lost in the desert for 40 days, and I've just been letting it go and grow. I think it's like the longest the wizard beard has ever got to, as some have described it. All right, Donald says, did you like Salem's Lot? I adore Salem's Lot. It's in my top 10. At one point, it was in my top 5. Revival probably kicked it out. So, and 1122, which really rose. I have a whole list of rankings. It was the 200th two-parter episode. Gunslinger says, was a good idea. Can hear and see you better. What about new book display and maybe display some covers and not just the bindings? Yeah, that was the initial intention. And as money is very tight after losing the day job, I was looking into new bookshelves. I was looking into a special like kind of almost like love seat kind of sitting by the fire having book time share. And I had somebody in the Facebook marketplace, actually, somebody who was doing the whole reseller weird thing. And I was going to drive out to their home. And then they're like, nope, I don't want anybody driving out to my home. I'm social distancing, man. So, okay, books on the bottom of the shelf are hard to see. Yeah, and that's because there was only so much I could do with making, stuff a little bit closer today. But, I don't know. The bottom shelf is all my Cemetery Dance and special editions and stuff like that. Ben Grimm, hola, Ben Grimm. What is up, man? I probably would have seen you again for Texas Frightmare maybe this past year, if not for that getting canceled. And cancel everything. Isn't that the hashtag online right now? Philip Roberts is here. He just wanted to say that I love your video. Keep up the good work and stay safe. Philip, thank you so very much. I greatly appreciate that. And then Corey gives a super chat. Thanks so very much, man. I appreciate you and just all of the support you've given the channel for years at this point. Okay, I'm going to have to jump and start talking because the chat is still going very nicely, 28 people. Travis Miller, I just wanted to try to acknowledge everybody before I really got into it. I got a few books before I can get to this one. After I finish watching this, I'm hoping it will jump to the top of the list. Yeah, and this is one where you can really listen to me talk about this and read some passages, but it's like your go-to manual that you can just jump to at any time. And I actually was like underlining passages and stuff. That's why I'm glad I have 2 different versions of this. I was like, the soft cover, I'll underline some of my favorite bits and we'll go about it like that. Mikey says, I got to go, sadly. Got staff coming in, laters and laters, fakes. Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to, Slasher's Code says, greetings and salutations. Vince B, I'm reading The Stand, abridged edition. All right, well, I have to get to it. I just have to. I will jump back to the chat at some point very soon. But, so on writing, as I mentioned, Cy King, man, and just really, he had this great idea for wanting to do something that was initially just going to be him giving advice to fellow writers, do's and don'ts, and just kind of some framework for how to approach it. And then he decided, no, I actually think I should probably, just do some information and background about myself, my life. And that's what we get in the first, it's almost 100 pages. And after 3 forewords, gargantuan, we go into CV. And CV, this is where I'm just going to kind of go right into the notes and stuff. And so we really get a sense for just kind of the troubled, very, very early childhood that Cy King has. And it's sad, he was ill for most of his very, very early adolescence. And he gives some recollections about, the fact that he was bedridden for like around a year and stuff. And that's why he ended up a year behind in school of all the other kids, because he had missed so much with various illnesses that he ended up there was no way he wouldn't have been held back because he had just missed too much time. He's like screaming in the cab, and the cab's like, shut up, if you don't get that kid to quiet down, I'm kicking you both out. And he talks about the first instance where a doctor said, this is only going to hurt for a sec, Steve, and it's not going to be that bad. And they ended up having to like pop his eardrum and, the fluid coming out and just the insane, immense pain. And he's like, this was even worse than, when I got run over. That was more sustained long-term pain. But this was, as he describes, the most excruciating he'd ever experienced. And then he had issues with his tonsils. He also describes this particular instance where he always wanted to be like in the Barnum and Bailey and like a circus like cat trainer and stuff. And he like is moving around this cinder block, and he's like imagining standing above it and training the animals in front of a crowd and all this different stuff. And he's carrying the cinder block, and then lo and behold, he didn't know there was a wasp's nest in the damn cinder block. And so a wasp comes and stings him, and it's this excruciating pain. But then after that, like it causes him to drop the cinder block on his foot. So it's a double whammy of nasty. And, you know, he also talks about the extent of moving around that they had to do because his mother, you know, just having to care for him and his older brother, you know, at the same time without a father, because the father was like peace and dipped out with the quickness like a total scumbag asshole. And it's interesting to hear how he finally started to find some joy in not just looking up to his older brother, you know, with his older brother David, but, you know, finding joy in writing and also, you know, reading initially, like, you know, comics. And that's what he did for that, like, you know, extended period of time where he couldn't actually go to school and he was just bedridden. He's like, I was constantly reading these war comics and stuff. And he even started like copying them down himself and showing them to his mother. And she's like, oh, are these your own stories? And he's like, no. And she's like, how about you write something of your own? And the first thing that he did was this story. It was called, where do I have it in the notes? Mr. Rabbit Trick. And so Mr. Rabbit Trick was, he wrote like a half dozen stories about this group of magical animals that went around helping young kids with stuff. And so that was a thing. But, you know, even beyond that, Happy Stamps is the first story that he ever talks about. And it was when these green stamps that he saw his mother, like, who had been in jail various times already for trying to counterfeit money. And then lo and behold, he takes it upon himself to try to help out his mother by counterfeiting these stamps for her. And he shows the story to his mother, and she's like, wow, this is actually quite good. I'm impressed, Steve, and I'm actually going to make copies of this, and I'm going to, you know, give you a quarter for actually writing something original yourself because I'm proud of you. And yeah, then they sold it to, I mean, just sold for a quarter to a couple other family members. And he's like, that was my first dollar as a writer. And you have to remember, this is like in the 50s. And then he later goes on to his obsession with film that starts with, you know, Kim and David actually going to see a lot of these like biker films and war films and, you know, like the crazy drive-in B-horror schlock of the 50s and the 60s that was so popular. And that was where he decided he wanted to start writing stuff like I Was a Teenage Grave Robber that he sold to somebody in Alabama who was a fanzine, and they changed the title. And he's like, I still prefer the original title. But the amusing story that he gets into is where he's talking about when he saw Pit and the Pendulum. And the script was written by Richard Matheson, if I recall correctly. And he decided that he was going to go home and he was going to write a novelization of it. And then he was going to take it to school and try to sell it to all of the different kids. And so he's selling it to all of the different kids. And he gets called to the principal's office at the end of the day. And they're like, yeah, you can't come to school and be peddling your disgusting, you know, wares. This is trash, Steve. And, you know, everybody knows that he was a big fan of EC Comics, hence, you know, the inspiration for Creepshow and stuff. And so, you know, that was him trying to do his own novelization of this sort of schlocky storytelling. And it was like less than 10 pages, but he said that it was a comprehensive, just kind of, you know, recap of everything. And all of the kids loved it. And he made like $12 or whatever. And it cost him just this tiny bit, like less than $1 to print everything up. And so, yeah, he's a little disappointed in that. And even when he had to give all the kids their money back, most of them were like, no, I'm still going to keep this. Sorry, Steve. And so I thought that was quite amusing. But, you know, let's get into one, since I've got all of these different notes about various portions in the book where he's talking about things. So, okay, so this is where losing ratings, Fuego. Rewrite your nature. Okay. Yeah, well, maybe this was it. When you write a story, you're telling yourself the story. When you rewrite, your main job is taking out all the things that are not the story. And so, okay, yeah, this was where he started, I believe. Yes, okay, so now I know where we're at. So this is actually once he's in school, in high school at this particular point. And, you know, he also talks about a couple of things that I just thought were a little bit amusing, where he got himself into more trouble as a kid, where he's out with his older brother and he wipes his butt with poison ivy. And so that was another weird affliction that he talked about. And then there was also his older brother, Dave, who had like this crazy high IQ, like 150, 160. And so he got this idea to make the super duper electromagnet, and they're like plugging this device into their wall outlet. It was like his older brother's science project, and they end up like knocking out all the power, and not just their apartment, but the entire building, and not just that building, but the adjacent building. And it's a funny little anecdote. Another thing King mentions that I thought was interesting is, the importance of not getting a TV until he was 11 years old. And he talks about how he thinks that it was good that he learned to read and write and just get really enamored with that before television was introduced to his life, because he says that, he's like, I was like one of the last generations where kids, didn't have the idiot box as their first and foremost like attraction to, entertainment. He's like, he thought it was very important for just his formative years as a writer and as a reader, both being things that he, constantly champions, and exceeding importance within that. So his first involvement with writing was his older brother Dave had this little, it was like a newsletter almost that they were doing in this small town of theirs. And it was called Dave's Rag. And it was everything from the speaker who's going to come to the local church to, some of the school scores and stuff like that. So, King was helping write with that. And that was him first dipping his toe into things. And, then as he got into high school and there was more stuff, he was asked to be the high school paper editor for the Drum. And, he was like, oh, I didn't really find it very intriguing. And so instead I did something called the Village Vomit. And the Village Vomit was where he got himself into trouble by doing an alternate newspaper where he was like talking mad smack about all the teachers and giving them nasty nicknames and all kinds of other just gross stuff. And he gave it out to all the kids at school. And I don't know how he thought he was not going to get himself in trouble doing this, but the naivety of youth and also wanting to appeal to people and be popular and all of this other stuff. So that was definitely a thing, and he ended up getting like a ton of detention for it. He thought he was going to get suspended, but they let him off the hook. And this was where it segued into what I was going to have as my first quote here, because he went from that to being asked to assist with the sports section for the local newspaper in Lisbon, which was called the Lisbon Weekly Enterprise. And they're like, okay, you're going to be a sports writer here. But this gentleman was very, very intrigued by him. And this is where only 56 pages into the book, King basically gets what he described as the best writing advice that he was ever given. And it was basically just about how, okay, you take what you're, where is it? Damn, I should have underlined this quote. Thanks for bearing with. I took my fair share of lit classes in my 2 remaining years at Lisbon, and my fair share of compositions, fiction, and poetry classes, but John Gould taught me more than any of them, and in no more than 10 minutes. And John Gould was the main guy behind the Lisbon, Free Enterprise. And he says, I wish I still had the piece. It deserves to be framed, editorial corrections and all, but I can remember pretty well how it went and how it looked after Gould had combed through it with that black pen of his. And he gives an example. But I only took the bad parts out. Most it's pretty good. Where is the? Okay, yeah, okay. I think this was more or less it. When you write a story, you're telling yourself the story. When you rewrite, your main job is taking out all the things that are not the story. And that's essentially, the essence and the importance of rewriting that King really, really stresses like crazy. He stresses the importance of, okay, you can write something, but essentially, and that's why he praises his editors in this so much as well, is because of the fact that, they essentially, they take your work and they kind of trim it up, and it kind of is trimming the fat, it's streamlining, and, King really hates on adverbs like crazy in this, which I find exceedingly amusing. And yes, as the book jumps on and jumps around, we hear all kinds of other interesting anecdotes, like when he actually is about to, get into college and stuff. He talks about where he got the inspiration for Graveyard Shift. It's where he was actually working at this mill post high school, and so apparently he actually was, getting ready to, take the 4th of July vacation off, and he was offered this job to go down over the 4th of July, holiday and stuff, into the bottom areas of this mill and actually clean the whole damn thing up. And he didn't do it, but he heard from this friend of his after the fact that, oh man, Steve, it was the craziest thing ever. The rats were as big as cats, and I swear I saw a couple that were even as big as dogs. And King is like, huh, that's interesting. And apparently senior year in college at the University of Orono in Maine, that's where he came back to the idea, and it was his first major sale, okay, when he was in college. And so that's where, you know, he'd made like $60 up until that point by selling a couple stories beforehand. And then for that one, when he sold it to Cavalier, one of those skin maggies, you know, he made like $200 on it. And he was like, I'm rich. And especially $200 back in 60s, man, that was definitely some serious loot. And so at that point, he talks about in this just being Tabby and just how much he enjoyed her writing and stuff like that. And he actually reprints one of her poems in here that she read at this, you know, like they were having these little writers meetings, and, you know, they would read poetry and various pieces that him and some of these other like English majors and, you know, that stuff were trying to put together. And that's where he met his wife, obviously, was at these meetings with Jim Bishop and stuff. And if any of you want to hear more about this awesome era that he only barely touches upon here in On Writing, he ended up expounding upon it significantly in the book, you know, Hearts in Suspension, which is a nonfiction one where he has this very lengthy essay about his time in college in Orono. And then there's also essays by teachers, friends, colleagues, all these different peeps. So I already did a review on that here on the channel. So if you have any interest in just hearing more about this fascinating time in King's life where he was starting to kind of break through and sell a few short stories and, you know, kind of the sowing of the seeds, so to speak. But yeah, his wife's poem is actually pretty damn beautiful. I gotta say, man, it's here in the notes for a reason. So it's called A Gradual Canticle for Augustine. And it goes like this. The thinnest bear is awakened in the winter by the sleep laughter of locusts, by the dream blustering of bees, by the honeyed scent of desert sands that the wind carries in her womb into the distant hills, into the houses of cedar. The bears heard a sure promise. Certain words are edible. They nourish, more than snow heaped upon silver plates or ice overflowing golden bowls. Chips of ice from the mouth of a lover are not always better, nor a desert dreaming always a mirage. The rising bear sings a gradual canticle, woven of sand that conquers cities by a slow cycle. His praise seduces a passing wind, traveling to the sea, wherein a fish, caught in a careful net, hears a bear's song in the cool, scented snow. And of course, King, since he wasn't much of a poet, he's just like, whoa, this girl is hot, and she's also wearing large, you know, leggings that would like connect to a garter belt. So he's like, wow, she's hot and she's smart. Holy smokes, I gotta get to know this lady. And he even asked her about more meaning of it. And of course, she gives like this deep distinction and, you know, the deeper meaning behind what she was saying. But he was immensely amused by the fact that she followed up with, yeah, I also really like bears. So it's cute. It's very sweet. And so as we soldier forward here, it really, as we get through the rest of CV here, okay. Yeah, this is where King briefly talks about. So as he was graduating, he describes, you know, his mother saying, well, you know, if you're trying to be a writer and, you know, you don't have a good job yet, maybe you should go get a teaching degree. And he describes his analogy of getting a teaching degree is, I did as she suggested, entering the College of Education at UMO and emerging 4 years later with a teacher's certificate, sort of like a golden retriever emerging from a pond with a dead duck in its jaws. It was dead, all right. And that's just where he's lamenting the fact that, yeah, it's very tough for teachers of honestly all varieties. I mean, I'm from a family of educators. My father recently retired, was a long-time English, history, Bible teacher. You know, he taught at the collegiate level, the high school preparatory, college preparatory level and stuff. And I mean, both of my little brothers, one is, he studied kinesiology, and now he's like a football coach, you know, football, you know, soccer, high school PE, stuff like that. So, I mean, that's another thing. And then my youngest brother has done all kinds of teaching, assistant principal at a small Christian school in Georgia. He's about to relocate up to Pennsylvania and stuff. So, I mean, it's just interesting that he laments the cause of the teacher and the sadness within that. And then he gets into just some of the specifics about, his courtship and then eventual marriage and them having 2 kids very quickly. And then, they're having this tough time of it because, she's working at Dunkin' Donuts the second shift because he's working the first shift at the New Franklin Laundry, which is where he has this very funny inspiration for the Mangler and where he had this foreman, this boss there that had hooks for hands, right? And so hooks for hands and the amusing aspect of that. And, obviously, if anybody has either seen the very silly Tobe Hooper film with Robert Englund entitled The Mangler or read the far better and more concise short story, it's, apparently the guy had lost his hands when they got stuck in the laundry press. So that was King, gaining inspiration from there. And he talks at one point about just how disgusted he was when he was working at this place because of the fact that he would always, it was more so like these tablecloths from these nicer like restaurants in Maine that would get dropped off at his laundromat. And so obviously they would sometimes take a few days for them to actually get to them. And there'd be all kinds of food particles, pieces of like lobster and clam and all this other crap that the tourists like to eat when they're in Maine. And he's like, I would open up the tablecloths and they would be filled with maggots and they tried to like climb up my damn arms. I'm putting the cloth through the steamer and shit. It's very inspiring to hear, the early life struggles, then finding his footing and his love with the writing and with, just reading in general. But then even after, he gets his degree and stuff, he still is struggling and working these odd end jobs. And I mean, they're living in this trailer, and they're like just barely getting by enough with him selling his little horror short stories to all these different magazines. Like he even says at one point where their daughter Naomi had this really nasty ear infection and they knew they needed the pink stuff for her, which I'm assuming penicillin or something, and they just did not have the money for it. And lo and behold, very, very graciously, kind of providentially, as my parents would say, a $500 check showed up for sometimes they come back because somebody wanted to pay him that much for it. So they were able to have a nice meal and get their daughter fixed up and stuff. And so just the fact that the perseverance remained with him and he just kept going, to such a ferocious degree. And it's really inspiring in that regard. And I mean, he also gets into the process of Carrie, and he also talks about how he still has like a lot of issues with that book, and he goes into the reasons for it. He's like, I never got to like Carrie White, and I never trusted Sue Snell's motives in sending her boyfriend to the prom with her, but I did have something there like a whole career. Tabby somehow knew it, and by the time I had piled up 50 single-space pages, I knew it. For one thing, I didn't think any of the characters who went to Carrie's prom would ever forget it. And he gets into just talking about how he'd written a couple novels previously. He'd already written The Long Walk and The Running Man and Rage, and they were later published, as everybody knows. But just the fact that this character was a hodgepodge of these 2 other girls that he had met at various times. It's just kind of sad in some regard, but just all of the self-doubt and just trepidation that he obviously encountered, before success ever came. I mean, that is legit perseverance, and that is really inspiring in that regard, in my estimation. And so this is about the time where he's getting to the very end of his story, but of course he has to briefly delve into his drinking, his substance abuse, and how quickly that escalated. I mean, he gets into it. He talks about the first time he ever got drunk, where he was on this Washington, D.C. senior trip, and it was 18 there for Pete's to drink, and so he went and he got this cheap, like $2 bottle of whiskey, and he got mad hammer time, and said to himself, I'm never going to do that ever again. And then, lo and behold, very next day, got right to it. And he correlates, that growing addiction with the fact that his mother died around the same time from ovarian cancer. And just, it's very sad to kind of cross-reference both of those things. And maybe that even poured more fuel on the proverbial fire, that grief, the growing addiction where he's doing, he's drinking, he's doing coke. I mean, all this different, really crazy, nasty stuff. And then, life isn't a support system for art, it's the other way around. And I find that just a very, very interesting and profound thing to say in this regard. But he also did, just at the very end of this, at the end of my adventures, I was drinking a case of 16-ounce tall boys a night, and there's one novel, Cujo, that I barely remember writing at all. I don't say that with pride or shame, only with a vague sense of sorrow and loss. I like that book. I wish I could remember enjoying the good parts as I put them down. And so, he's like, I no longer wanted to drink, and I no longer wanted to be sober either. I felt evicted from life. And this is where King is just getting very vulnerable about stuff. And, it's just interesting as he finally segues into the advice portion of all of this. And he's like, what is writing? It's telepathy, of course. And, it's just very intriguing in that regard. And so that's when he segues from, CV into the actual on writing portion. And this is where he just dispenses advice, and I'll probably just lightning round it. It's called Toolbox, at least in this first portion. And I'm just going to briefly jump through the comments right here, guys, because I know I've been ranting and just giving King's story at least here for a little bit. And so I'm going to check back in with everybody here. I saw that it was most definitely go gadget going. Okay, they moved TFW to September 11th. Okay, so it looks like peeps are just still having Shamrock Balls. Love your channel, buddy. You inspired me to read The King. Stay safe. Thanks, Shamrock Balls. Have you read The Institute? It's a King novel, of course. Read The Institute. It's pretty good. Stranger Things by King. Institute was great. I think she was just asking just random question. Same here. Ruptured. Okay. Okay. Talking amongst yourselves, which is good, since I'm just kind of ranting and going off here. All right. TG with 7 says, hey, Fuego. What's up? Yeah. RJ Price. Damn, I forgot this was live today. Wish I'd known since work is slow today. I was surprised how well I liked on writing. I was surprised once I started reading. I had a hard time putting it down. Yeah, it's a very brisk read. It's less than 300 pages, man. I mean, fascinating in that regard for sure. Okay. Hello, everyone. Okay, so it's just more peeps. Annabelle is jumping on. Very sweet. Okay. Well, since the chat did not get updated too incredibly much, let's jump to King's advice for writers. And so he has this analogy about the toolbox, and he's talking about how his uncle was like, if you are going to write, he's taking this, his uncle had this toolbox, it was like a handyman of sorts, and he was just talking about, you have your most important tools on the top level, and then your next level is, a little bit more, a little bit less important, but stuff that you would still need, and, just the layering process. But the most interesting thing is where he's like, yeah, you need all of these tools because you want to have everything on hand despite the situation you may encounter. However, you don't want to overfill it because you still want to be able to haul it around. So, have your most important stuff, but don't overdo it. Don't get too meticulous. Don't overthink it. Try to cover all of your bases, but don't get too ridiculously nuanced with stuff, because isn't that the case with like art and a lot of things in general, is being overly analytical and just trying to bring too many weapons to a fight or something. I don't know. It's just fascinating in that regard. And so this is where he gets into the top layer, the next layer, and so on. And I think I've got, where is this? Okay, bottom paragraph. Okay, that's where we're talking about fragments. So I should at least give the insight about. So he basically says, if you're trying to write, your top layer is going to be vocabulary and it's going to be grammar. So obviously having illustrious, immense vocabulary is going to be helpful, but you don't want to overwrite. I mean, there's some stylistic people who make it work, and then there's others who don't. And, it's just too overly wordy. You have to find that nice middle ground. And then grammar, I mean, the road to hell is paved with adverbs, as he says at one particular point that I find funny. But he makes the high school analogy about how he's like, well, I hear all these writers say, yeah, I don't know, proper grammar and / punctuation, whatever stuff. And so that's one of the things that throws me off. I never really understood it properly in high school. And as somebody who taught high school English, King just kind of berates those people a little bit and in kind of an amusing fashion. He's just like, look, back in high school, maybe when you were concerned about, does this boy like me? Or, am I gonna, get to hang out with so-and-so this weekend? Or, all of the different things that, high school students are distracted from their studies by. He just kind of says, look, this isn't rocket science. If you want to be a writer, you can apply yourself and you can improve your grammar to a degree. And it's not brain surgery here, people. So having a nice assortment within your personal vocabulary is definitely going to be in that top layer. And then grammar, just knowing how to structure sentences, proper punctuation, all that different stuff. I mean, your subject and your predicates and all this different stuff, unless it's an exclamation. But, nonetheless, and then he goes into the next layer being paragraph, which entails, just knowing how to properly put together a paragraph. So, your top layer of having that assortment within your vocabulary and then knowing how to structure, that vocabulary within a sentence. And then you go to the next level, which is almost like the expansion. And that's when you get into a paragraph. And your paragraph is obviously, structuring, density, the dangers of using informal essays and just making each paragraph like too much of its own thing, as opposed to having bearing within the bigger picture, within the page. He also stresses here, the aspect of rewriting. And then one of my favorite quotes within the entire book is where he says, writing is refined thinking. So if you want to be a writer and you're just like, okay, you have to at least think of grand ideas, or just at least important, intriguing stuff that somebody else will, it doesn't have to be everybody, but I mean, somebody out there somewhere, has to find what you're actually writing about to be of interest and just viable to some degree. And, because there is something out there for everybody as far as subject matter goes, but you have to take your thoughts on that subject and refine them while you're writing them. And so I thought it's one of my absolute favorite quotes in the entire thing, that writing is refined thinking. And then the thing about frags, as he calls them here, fragmented sentence stuff. So essentially, this is the portion that I found interesting. He's like, it is possible to overuse the well-turned fragment, and Kellerman sometimes does. That's an author he's referring to. But frags can also work beautifully to streamline narration, create clear images, and create tension, as well as to vary the prose line. A series of grammatically proper sentences can stiffen that line and make it less pliable. Purists hate to hear that and will deny it till their dying breath, but it's true. Language does not always have to wear a tie and lace up shoes. The object of fiction isn't grammatical correctness, but to make the reader welcome and then tell a story, to make him or her forget, whenever possible, that he or she is reading a story at all. The single sentence paragraph more closely resembles talk than writing, and that's good. Writing is seduction. Good talk is part of seduction. If not, why do so many couples who start the evening at dinner wind up in bed? And I thought that is funny, and intriguing as well, where he's like, writing is seduction, but also the part that really spoke to me is where he's like, language does not always have to wear a tie and lace up shoes. And that's where it's like, you don't have to have the most fluent and articulate sort of speech, because a lot of the time that's people trying to think too hard about their speech as opposed to speaking from the heart. And it is a balance between the two somewhere of, head and heart with that sort of writing. But nonetheless, I mean, I thought that was just very good advice, in the fact that it's the epitome of those who overwrite, is where, they think that everything has to be so dressed up. And, I don't know, writing is seduction. That's just a very sexy sentiment in my estimation. I totally dig that. And so, all right. So as we continue along with this, he basically says it's about beat, not the melody, and you have to learn that beat. And okay, the bottom of 131 and 133. And this is where, okay. And then 131 was the other part that Okay, this is another passage that's interesting. In fiction, the paragraph is less structured. It's the beat instead of the actual melody. The more fiction you read and write, the more you'll find your paragraphs forming on their own, and that's what you want. When composing, it's best not to think too much about where paragraphs begin and end. The trick is to let nature take its course. If you don't like it later on, fix it then. That's what rewrite is all about. And so once again, that's really just profound advice that I appreciate the hell out of. And yeah, but his biggest sentiment here is to be a writer, you got to read a lot and write a lot. And that's wherein you can discover the magic of the muse. You know, it's really great in that regard. And yeah, man, it's he makes some interesting analogies about John Grisham. He talks about various others, and this is where I'm trying not to make the end of this like insanely boring, because I know that this is a book that some may not find incredibly intriguing, unfortunately. But you know, losing ratings. In my view, stories and novels consist of 3 parts: narration, which moves the story from point A to point B, and finally to point Z; description, which creates a sensory reality for the reader; and dialogue, which brings characters to life through their speech. You may wonder where plot is in all of this. My answer anyway, is nowhere. I won't try to convince you that I've never plotted anything more than I try to convince you that I've never told a lie, but I do both as infrequently as possible. I distrust plot for 2 reasons. First, because our lives are largely plotless, even when you add in our reasonable precautions and careful planning. And second, because I believe plotting and the spontaneity of real creation aren't compatible. And there's this part where he says, when during the course of an interview for The New Yorker, I told the interviewer Mark Singer that I believe stories are found things like fossils in the ground, he said that he didn't believe me. And I replied that that was fine, as long as he believed that I believe it. And I do. Stories aren't souvenir t-shirts or Game Boys. Stories are relics, part of an undiscovered pre-existing world. The writer's job is to use the tools in his or her toolbox to get as much of each out of the ground intact as possible. Sometimes the fossil you uncover is small, a seashell. Sometimes it's enormous, a fucking T-Rex with all those gigantic ribs and grinning teeth. Either way, short story or 1,000-page whopper of a novel, the techniques of excavation remain basically the same. And I just really, once again, the fact that he describes the process of writing and concocting a story as just this discovery process where you see just the tiniest piece of it, almost like, almost like Bobby in the Tommyknockers, where she just sees that tiniest little bit of this black-like thing, and she's like, what the hell is that? And she starts to dig it up, and lo and behold, it's a goddamn alien spaceship. So that's where, you can see a small idea, and if you just pick at it, and you dig around it, and just take in the time to use your tools to dig and cultivate and do your thing. It's a really dope analogy on his part for just expansion of creation, the efforts associated with it, and just the joyful discovery that it entails. It's inspiring, How do you write? 1 word at a time, no distractions. And this is where, as he gets to the actual on-writing portion, this is where he starts to criticize others' techniques and things of that nature and just really get into it. And, he describes this as, this isn't a textbook and there aren't a lot of exercises, but I want to offer you one now in case. And so he actually, at page 170, and that's the reason that I marked this part, is he actually gives, he gives like a scenario to people. And it's about, this woman whose ex-husband has escaped from prison. And, he's like trying to track her down and go after her. And he just gives all of these details, describes the scenario, and then just talks about use that as like that first little thing that you dug up, and then just expand upon it yourself, dig with your tools. And he even says, email me at stephenking.com afterwards and let me know what you came up with. Granted, this is like 20 years old, but who knows, man? People are still discovering this book and the cool techniques involved with it. So the fact that he even gives like a specific scenario that he wants readers to just like go after, I thought that was pretty cool. But another thing that he rants about that I find funny is the caste system of writers, especially amongst critics, and how there's this kind of your crap doesn't stink mentality with people who, okay, this writer was always an auteur, so that's where they will always remain, as opposed to somebody, let's say they started out writing like pulp fiction stuff, like way back, schlocky, hammy stuff, and then they slowly migrated into more thought-provoking, more well-defined plots, improved language and stuff. And it is something that he says at one point is where he doesn't think a bad writer can become a good writer, but he does think a competent writer can improve their skills and become a lot better. You know, he's like, if you're not, you can't go from good to great necessarily, but you know, it does occasionally happen in rare circumstances of talent. But the fact that he kind of, it almost feels to me like he's ridiculing the people who, as he tried to do less schlocky stuff, deeper stories like Shawshank Redemption, like The Body, even later on, stuff like, you know, 11/22, all those years later, and Hearts in Atlantis, and so on and so forth. As he tried to get into less horror and more dramatic, serious storytelling, there were people who were still branding him as a horror hack that shouldn't be taken seriously. And I feel like that little passage where he's just reviling critics and stuff is very pertinent in that regard. And I'm seeing how much time we have been going for. So almost an hour. We'll have to wrap it up a little bit sooner than I necessarily wanted to, because I don't know how intriguing all of you guys are finding this, but I found it just very inspiring. He also mentions that bad writing can be as inspiring as good writing. So you could read like a total turd that is poorly written and plotted and all this other stuff, and you're just like, the inspiring aspect is you could be like, wow, I could write something better than that. And so that can build confidence within you by having read something, you know, that is very, very subpar. And once again, he doubles down on, if you don't have time to read, you don't have time to write. That's how you soak in the importance of everything else that's going down. And Tabby will always be the best ideal reader. Yeah, that's right, the IR, as he calls her, as I, you know, move into the home stretch here. But you know, this was boy, backstory. Need to talk about it. Research. My notes. Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. The backstory. So he does, in fact, in the back half of this, give like the backstory about a lot of different books of his. You know, talks about you know, plotting versus, you know, like the few times he did try plotting, and so, you know, he calls out books like Insomnia and you know, there's at least one or two others, but you know, he's like, there's some books where I tried to plot and I tried to overthink. And then there's a lot of other ones where stuff just came much more naturally. Bag of Bones is one that he makes reference of. And he talks at length in this back half, I must admit, about just, you know, the intriguing aspects of, you know, his approach with writing certain books, like Misery, for instance, where he's talking about how, you know, he was on this plane and, you know, he wrote just a quick synopsis on a napkin, and like, what that all entailed apparently was just him, you know, initially he was going to have Mike Noonan, excuse me, not Mike Noonan, I'm thinking Bag of Bones. Originally he was going to have Misery like feed Sheldon to her pig and make the Misery Returns, you know, book out of his flesh. I was like, wow, you really, in that case, we're thinking you were going to go for the, it was originally going to be a Bachman book, right? So that would have been a Bachman ending for sure, like a pseudo EC Comics, you know, Tales from the Crypt kind of ending. And King doesn't typically go for those sort. But, you know, as we're getting through the home stretch here, he starts to give just like straight up advice, like 100% advice about if you're trying to devote time. He's like, at least give yourself like 4 to 6 hours of reading and writing daily. Try to crank out at least 10 pages in a day if you can, or even just 1,000 words. You know, don't try to labor over a manuscript more than 3 months. I thought that was a big one. Your volume of output versus volume of laziness. And this is where he calls out a couple writers where he's like, there's a couple British crime authors that, you know, over the course of their career put out like hundreds and hundreds of books. And he's like, and then there's someone like Thomas Harris who's written 5. And it's like, what are you doing the rest of the time? He kind of, for somebody who has been so prolific and so consistent with putting stuff out at least once, sometimes even more than that a year, yeah, he throws a few peeps under the bus, which I find interesting. And he's like, write what you know, well, yes, but also follow your heart and your imagination. Plus, do not aspire for success, fame, and money. He's like, if you're trying to be the next Stephen King or Dean Koontz or John Grisham or whatever, like the thing about that is, you know, if you're just trying to write something that you think could be successful and profitable, that's disingenuous and it's going to come off as such. He's like, when people mark somebody as the next Stephen King, unless it's him like endorsing Clive Barker or something like that, that's a little bit different. But he just talks about don't get into writing for the wrong reasons. I thought that was really, really interesting. And then he basically makes the correlation between narration, description, and dialogue, and how these are like three other things once you're actually getting to the essence of writing, how important it is. And he's like, plot is the good writer's last resort and the dullard's first choice. The story that results often feels artificial and labored, and why worry about, and this is a funny thing that he says, because everybody has criticized him about his endings. This is what Stephen King has to say about endings. He's like, and why worry about the ending? Why be such a control freak? Sooner or later, every story comes out somewhere. Yeah, that's him kind of trying to defend himself for with the type of writing he describes, where you're just letting it flow and letting it go and not trying to overthink things. Like, he ridicules plotting, and yet I do feel like you need to kind of have an idea where things are going to end. You can't just blindly go into it. But, King has written some great endings in other instances too. So I don't know. Sometimes following your heart is good, but I do feel like that as he constantly declares balance, it's kind of important to have that sort of balance about things. It is big in that regard. Story is honorable and trustworthy. Plot is shifty and best kept under house arrest. So he's just doubling down on things right there. It's not about setting, it's about the story always. That's another thing. With dialogue, know your limitations. Just observation is important. Honesty is key, but definitely listen. He talks about, first, narration, and then description, knowing how to describe things, but don't over describe things. But once again, he's very much about, doubling down on that healthy medium in between that really just is tough for a lot of writers to find. So, being able to construct compelling narration is important. Don't overly describe, people, settings, situations, just find a nice healthy balance. He talks about Mike Noonan's charity work, when he had writer's block, and how it was originally like 3 or 4 pages. And his wife was like, who cares about this? This is dragging the story in bag of bones. Trim it. And he trimmed it to like 3 paragraphs, I think he said, or like half a page or something. And his wife was like, this flows a lot better, right? And he's like, yeah, it most definitely does. And then dialogue, his suggestions for, he's like, okay, there's some people who are terrific, with just coming up with a scenario, and just an idea for a story. And, they can narrate it very well, but when it comes to actual like dialogue, they suck. And he throws Lovecraft under the bus for that, which a lot of people have notoriously, called out as being apparent. And he's like, there's some people that just write great dialogue. Elmore Leonard is somebody that he calls attention to, and just the naturalness of the discussion amongst Chili, who was played by John Travolta in both films and stuff. But long story short, he's like, if you don't feel like your dialogue is that good, one of the best ways to improve it is to just observe other people, listen, just try to talk more with people, try to interact more with other people. I know that's tougher, especially right now in this world, in this day and age, but the best stories are about the people, not the event, is another thing that he brings to mind. And symbolism exists to adorn and enrich, not create a sense of artificial profundity. And so he's like, yeah, I wrote his name to be John Coffey, for instance, in The Green Mile, because JC, Jesus Christ, a martyr, somebody who was falsely accused and killed. That's what we get there. And so he's like, don't overthink your symbolism. Like, if it's there, embrace it, but don't overdo it. Once again, it's like, this porridge is just right. It's the mentality where he says, don't overthink things, don't overdo things, but definitely don't half-bake it either. Try to get, through repetition and through, it's almost like strengthening a muscle. That's how you can improve upon stuff. And then in the back half of the book, he does talk about something I mentioned earlier, the writer's block for The Stand. And he also, as Austin pointed out, the importance of having an ideal reader. So he's like, yeah, I think it's fine. Some people hate, taking your book, your finished manuscript, and actually showing it to a bunch of people after it's gone through your editor and everything. If it's ready to publish and you can still do some additional revisions, show it to some friends, show it to some family members. Some people think that's a bad idea, but King is like, no, I think it's good. And especially to have one ideal reader, one IR, one singular person who you're almost writing for, because they can be your biggest critic and they can be your biggest constructive critic. And the fact that they can definitely, as they get more adjusted to your voice as it improves and you strengthen that proverbial stuff, it's just, I don't know, it's a good suggestion. And, you know, this is another one that he has. Second draft equals first draft minus 10%. Good luck. That's like a bit of advice that he heard once, and he can't remember specifically who it was from. But, yeah, that honestly just gets almost through, you know. And then I also talked already about just his thoughts on the dangers of writing courses / retreats / workshops and stuff like that, because he thinks that he talks about the where the hell did I put it? He talks about the door shut / door open mentality. It's one of the last things that he brings up. And the door shut is where he thinks the creationary process should start out. Is you should get to at least your first draft of your manuscript with the door shut all by yourself, not trying to get other people's mindset in there and suggestions in there. And that's where he says there is a danger within those sort of daily workshops and stuff like that, because of the fact that you're supposed to often be showing what you worked on the previous day, and then people can compromise it and lead you in a direction that is not your own. And then it starts to become, you know, almost theirs to a degree and not solely yours. And so he talks about the door shut mentality is when you're initially working on it, and then it becomes the door open mentality afterwards when you are confident enough in this first. It's almost like, you know, the first cut of a film, you know, and then, you know, you're doing test screenings with audiences. And that's where, you know, the constructive criticism can come. That's where the door is open to your IR, to your editor, to some friends and family and stuff like that. And they can help refine the finished product, as opposed to being a constant part of critiquing and suggesting throughout, because in that case, it is so much less your own. And then he also gives some advice for finding an agent, the pros and cons of it. He mentions Writer's Market and LMP, Literary Marketplace. Those are two references that I'm not sure how viable they still are. But, I mean, really, at the end of the day, I apologize if some of y'all found this discussion to be a little on the boring side. But as somebody who wants to get back into writing myself, especially in the current state of things, you know, I can film riffing off my head about, you know, a movie or a television series or a book or whatever. And I still really love doing that. You know, I started out as a print journalist, and even before that as like aspiring creative writer, writing short stories as a kid, and then even, you know, into my 20s and stuff like that. But journalism became more of a calling, and I was a print journalist for 5 years, from 2009 into 2014. But it was around that time when the umpteenth print publication that I was working for dried up because print was dying, and I was making less money per word and all this different stuff. I just knew I had to be a little bit more versatile and get, you know, more versed in talking in front of a camera. I think the best can do both. You know, they're dual threats, so to speak. And yet, as much as I love critiquing other people's art, and I know this is something that Cecil is like right in the same boat with me about, is that as much as I love critiquing other people's art, and this is something that you can argue about if Kevin Smith even makes very good art anymore, but the cool thing that Kevin does now is that he loves discussing other people's creativity and yet still creates himself. I love discussing art and other people being creative. I love just shooting the shit about it off the cuff, you know? I mean, you have to do your pre-production, your research and stuff, but really, I mean, just, it's very much just finding the melody and stuff, or, you know, just finding the beat as opposed to, you know, melody and stuff, and just almost the improvisation of it that King talks about with just letting the story take you. That's how I kind of approach these sort of discussions where, you know, I come in with my general thoughts, but I really just, you know, like to just riff on it, so to speak. You know, it's a very like blues jazz sort of approach, which a lot of my favorite music from, you know, the 60s and 70s kind of had its roots within. But as much as I love talking about other people's creativity, I want to create myself. And so this book has inspired me to have a newfound passion to make the attempt at it. And it's a great guidebook for all of that. I mean, that being the anniversary edition, and once more, this being the original hardcover. And the thing is, King at the very end talks about the accident and just how it hampered the process of creation as well for the end. And it's very sad hearing him talk about recalling the experience of the accident, the pain that he went through, the correlations back to when he was this is bookended with him talking about some of the earliest pain he experienced as a very young child, and the worst pain he'd experienced as an adult up until that point with getting run over while walking down the road. And so it's interesting how, the bookending pain and yet the struggle and the success, that kind of, was between all of that. It's a fascinating read, and some may not enjoy the writing suggestive passages as much as others. Hey, tomato, art is subjective, as I always say on this channel. And I'm just stoked that all of you tuned in for this, and it's greatly appreciated. I'm going to take one last look before I wrap things up here at everything that y'all are saying and have said in the meantime. Okay. Annabelle, okay, I saw that already. Chief says already is inspired me to try and get back into writing. A few pages of a short story. Yeah, and honestly, for the Hail Ka-Tet on Fridays, Freak Out Fridays, that would be definitely one of the best times to showcase anything that you have creatively worked on the Facebook group, whether it's, a short you're working on, whether it's like, I know Jacob Dowse has done this many times, showing musical pieces he's worked on. A few other peeps have. I mean, it's a fun time to showcase creativity. Annabelle said, I loved all the advice King wrote here. I use them not only in writing, but also filmmaking, which I didn't expect. Yeah, it's a very observational book, and I really, really enjoyed it for that regard. Defiled Divinity, I love that name, says, I'm in the middle of reading on writing. Awesome. He gives props to J.K. Rowling, which is funny. Irish Technical Thinker just got here. Oh no, it's about to end. I'm so sorry, sir. I don't really care for Lovecraft either, or Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah, they're not for everybody. It was so damn good. John Coffey was God, in my opinion. Fantastic book. Okay. So what's the book of the month for April, Jacob says? Well, therein lies an interesting thing to mention here, everyone. So now that we are at the end of our proceedings and such, okay. So we have 3 different anniversaries, okay, that are coming in the month of June. I would imagine everybody knows what the May book of the month is going to be. It's going to be If It Bleeds for May. So I'm just giving everybody a heads up about that. May is it's coming out a week earlier now at the end of April, but I'm still making it the May book of the month. And I am going to read through that and post a non-spoilers review probably within just a couple of days, since I'm definitely going to have time to cruise through that with the quickness. I've got the book and the Audible both on pre-order, so I'm excited for If It Bleeds. So If It Bleeds will be for May, and then we'll have a big spoilers discussion at the end of May for If It Bleeds. But June has 3 different anniversaries. April has donuts for anniversaries, as far as like golden anniversaries go, either 5 or 10 years. So we have 3 options, and I'm going to be starting a poll on the Facebook group right when I get out of this video, and I'm going to give it until next Saturday, and on next Saturday's video, we will get the official announcement. But if you just keep an eye on the poll on the Facebook group, you'll be able to determine what everybody has voted on. So in June, the 3 anniversaries that we have are Finders Keepers, which is a 5-year anniversary, and it's my favorite of the Bill Hodges trilogy. However, you kind of need to have read Mr. Mercedes. Well, not necessarily. There's really only one reference to Mr. Mercedes, but it definitely doesn't hurt. So Finders Keepers is your one option for a 5-year anniversary. Second option is going to be none other than Rose Madder. Rose Madder is it's a Cy King book that very few people I know have read. It's about spousal abuse. It's very much in the same regard as Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne, when King was writing from a woman's perspective for that period of time in the early 90s. So this is for a 25th anniversary. Rose Madder That is your second option. And then your third option is none other than, it's definitely a fan favorite. It came out in 1985. We are talking Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew is the second collection of short stories, includes some great ones like oh boy, The Reach and The Mist and various other really dope ones. So right when I turn this off, I'm going to start the poll on Hail to Stephen King, the Facebook group. So if you're not a part of the Facebook group, I'm the sole admin and moderator. Please come join us. Whoa! If you want some cool palaver about Cy King and the rest of his family, Joe, and a little bit of Tabino in here and there. So your three options. One more time. We have a week to determine who it's going to be. I have a feeling who it's going to be, and I almost just dictated, but honestly, it's we have to start somewhere with this, especially if we're going to try to cover everything else. So you have Skeleton Crew, you have Rose Matter, and you have Finders Keepers. Those are our three options for April. And I extend gracias to everybody for tuning into this. I've been Jaime and Fuego, and y'all know you can find me on various social media sectors, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube with my own personal channel, In Fuegotainment. It's 50 subscribers from hitting 1,000. Those are meager numbers compared to what we have here on the horror show with over 32,000, but it's a channel I just didn't do anything with for quite a while. So youtube.com/Jaime and Fuego, spelled just like my silly moniker. Reviews that I just filmed today, because I filmed quite a few. I did The Wave, which is a 2020 film with Justin Long and Donald Faison, crazy psychedelic trip of a film. I also recorded a review for Vivarium with Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg, and then a lot of other stuff that I've done recently, tons of Star Wars coverage, Marvel films, little indie dramas and stuff like that, Oscar darling. So that's what you will find on my personal channel. Nothing scarific, really. I mean, here and there, there's a drama or a thrillerish kind of thing or something sci-fi, but for the most part, it is contained to things that are of the non-spectacular variety. So jump over, check that out. It would be greatly appreciated, and obviously like and share this video if you're down with it. So once again, do you want Rose Matter? Do you want Skeleton Crew? Or do you want Finders Keepers? And you have a week to let your voice be known. So once again, I've been Fuego. Y'all have been awesome, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sen amigos, and constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you. But I am hopeful that we get to share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until that instance occurs, remember to stay scared, stay safe, and read Stephen King. Which of these three would you like? Appreciate you, everybody. I have bandmates coming over. They might be here already. We're kind of social distancing, just meeting in a small group, right? It's not that crazy, but thank you so very much, everybody. Danke, gracias, arigato, merci. Yes, muchas gracias. Say thank you, everybody, and I'll see you next Saturday. Peace.